All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in to Wednesday Night Reviews. I'm your host, Konrad, and joining us today is Josh Stafford and Howard Wong to talk about their new book, Damned Cursed Children, from Source Point Press. So thanks so much for coming on the show, guys.
Thank you
No
for
problem.
having
Thank
us.
you.
Awesome. So I always like to start when it comes to anyone I have that creates comics on the show. I like to ask, how did you both get started specifically with comics?
Ooh, that's a good question. I collected it a lot for a while, but I didn't start until like seriously collecting I started during the Image days. I'll be frank, because the production value was completely different. And I had friends who brought them into, like I was in high school, so you brought them into high school, and I was like, "Is that a comic book?" Because I'm used, like, I was used to the corner store stuff. The,
Yep.
if you guys are younger, the old school printing, look it up. I'm not going to go into detail because it'll be a whole conversation here for that. And I left it after I sort of got married, to be honest. And then I was working a corporate job, and I was really good at it, thank God. And my wife asked me, like, "You're pretty unhappy." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm okay." It's like you sort of like, I was doing the go to work, come home, watch TV, go to the mall kind of guy, and I was like,
Yep.
you know. And she asked me what I used to do. I'm like, I used to read and collect comic books and write them. It was sort of like the sheepish thing of saying, "You married a geek, ta-da!" But
Surprise.
she asked me to do it and to start collecting and writing again. And then throughout that process, she asked me. I got her to read comic books that I liked, and then she asked me a very simple question, because she reads manga, and like it was crazy. She had a whole collection of Dragon Ball, like the original like series. We know have the spines that make into
Oh,
yeah. She's that kind of kid, person. And then she asked me like, when I read this Batman comic, it doesn't make sense. And I'm like, what doesn't make sense? It's a Batman comic. It's pretty straightforward. It's like, no, he got punched in the face, but he's like in a meeting the next day, totally fine. And I sort of dawned on me, like, it's like, in manga, people get hurt. They either get hurt or they die. Like, they're dead. And I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty good point. And it makes sense. And that made me think about why we don't do that. So I started writing After the Cape because of that. So After
okay.
the Cape was my first series. I might have I'll have the first trade, which is fine. This is the trade paperback for the first storyline, the first miniseries from Image Comics. Um, and I started writing that for her, actually. I don't know what's even here. And it was weird because as I wrote it, I started grounding everything that you would usually do in a superhero comic book. So instead of him being like Superman, where he's like, "I'm gonna go to school, get a job, do everything because I'm so super," this guy dropped out of high school because he had to decide to become a hero or go to school. So he flash forward in his life where the story starts. He's married with kids. He's living in, dire straits, the really bad part of town. But he retired because he couldn't do it anymore because he became addicted to alcohol and other things.
Oh,
Uh,
jeez.
out of depression because he used to be revered and everything, his statues in the city of him, but he can't feed his own kids. So we start the story from there, and it just goes downhill. And it was all because of that. And I pitched it to Image, and they liked it. It's like this dark, depressing superhero story. It's like, okay, you really want to do this? Great. And that's how I started. And it was like this wonderful, beautiful time when I got the green lit for it, because I literally had my first kid during that time. So I really wrote the script as I
Oh,
was like
wow.
being a new fathers, which was a wonderful, terrible time because sleep was very, very low on the agenda to begin with, and when I got greenlit for that, it became like, I'm gonna go to work and sleep at lunch. That's what I'll do.
Oh my
That's
god.
what I did. So that's how I started, and then after Cape 2, got a lot of anthologies, and I veered off into mobile games and other things after that. And that's how, and then it came. You never really leave comics. I tried to leave comics a few times, to be honest, to be frank, and I have friends who never let me leave. So I kind of hovered into comic books, and now I'm coming back with this wonderful horror miniseries with Josh, who also writes comic books and who I met through comic books, actually. So we'll talk about that after Josh talks about how he started in comic books.
Yeah, I'm a genuine lifelong comic reader. Like I remember getting my first comic book from my dad when I was 4 years old, a
Oh,
Fantastic
wow.
Four comic book. And so like I'm a lifer. Like I don't collect comic books. I just read comic books. Like it's not going to stop in the same way that I'm not going to stop watching movies or music or whatever. So I went to an art high school with intention of going into animation, and just the harsh reality is I was not good enough to get into animation. I was good
Oh,
enough to hang in there at high school and had a good time. But then I went off to film school, and in the years after that, worked on a number of projects, both on the crew or writing and directing some of my own short films that had a little bit of success getting out to film festivals and stuff. Going to the San Diego Film Fest with one of my short films was where I met Howard. And
okay.
um, then I kind of stumbled in. I'm kind of a geek who stumbled into writing comic books because a friend of ours named Chris Waddell was doing some independent publishing here in Ottawa. And in a very similar way to how Damn Cursed Children happened, of me randomly saying a stupid title and then it becoming a reality, I was joking around with Chris about zombies, about zombie monkeys, and that became a comic book. And now we're working on, it's not like a monthly book, it's kind of like an issue comes out every couple of years, a series of one shots, and we're currently working on the fourth issue of that. It's going to be called Zombies Anthology, and it's a series of little short stories. And then it's all kind of luck and nepotism and a bit of hard work. And I've got on my own, I've got a short in an anthology, a really neat anthology called Strange Romance that you could find online at Comixology and places like that.
Mhm.
And just this year, despite this being a horrible year, it's been very productive for me because in 2020, Howard and I were ramping up to this January release date of Damn Cursed Children after years of working on it. And I got a short in an anthology called Flip that's currently available at Amazon and your local bookstores. And that's through an editor named Jack Briglio, who Howard has worked with as well, a local Ottawa guy.
Mhm.
And I got to write an episode of DC Superhero Girls. So I got to write a Flash cartoon. And that really is, it's all downhill from here. Because if you would have told 4-year-old me that I got to write a little 3-minute Flash cartoon. So yeah, so now I've got my toes in it and doing some writing, and Howard and I hope to do some more stuff in the future. But my day job is I co-own the Mayfair Theater here in town. So
Oh,
it's
right
a
on.
1932 independent cinema, which we, like everybody
Ah,
else, is in lockdown right now. But so that's
yeah.
amazing. That's super fun. And so I kind of go between a little bit of writing and running this indie cinema, and yeah, and now Howard and I will be doing publicity for Dan Cursed Children for the next 5 months because we have a monthly book for 5 months in a row.
That sounds about right. And yeah, actually, just the book itself, if I'm not mistaken, is going to be a total of 4 or 5 issues, correct?
5 issues,
Five
yes.
issues, yeah.
5 issues. And the first one comes out on the 27th of the month, correct? On January 27th?
Absolutely. It's coming out the 27th of the month, and if you guys are hearing it for the first time, you can still back order it. And if you can't find it from your local comic book shops, it's going to be interesting. You can actually go directly to SourcePoint Press's website. They have digital versions, and I believe they also do physical copies to people because a lot of shops have been closed down. So they're maybe trying to fill that area of people trying to find comic books who have no access to comic books. So that's the new reality we're in. So, that's a couple places where you can grab it.
Absolutely perfect. And I mean, yeah, lockdown has certainly been interesting. New lockdown as we're going into it now is going to definitely be fun for business to play with, to say lightly. But I'm glad that SourcePoint can adapt and they're willing to get your book out in multiple ways. Um, Now that you've mentioned, Josh, about the theater, I'm starting to click into it. But I did want to ask, so when you guys sent me over the pages for the book that you have, and I've had a look at it, it's clearly inspired by like old school, like 1930s to 50s horror comics and films. The main cover itself, which I'll pop up on the screen, um, is definitely a riff on The Shining. So just as a general question then, sort of what inspired you guys to write Damn Cursed Children, as comics wise, or is it film, pop culture? What was it that got it kickstarted for you?
Me being sick in bed and Josh calling me, to be frank. I have kids, and when they were in daycare, they brought back, I don't know, multiple diseases, I think, at the same time. Because I was literally trading places with my wife who were sick all the time during those couple of months. So Josh, in his great wisdom, called me up during the time when I was in bed and dying and asked me how I was doing, which was a great question to ask. I believe he was asking me if I was going to go to the big convention in Toronto and if he could get him in. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be alive, but sure, no problem. And then he asked me, are you still sick? And I'm like, yeah, I'm still sick from the last week or the week before. What week is this? I don't remember it. And then he blurted out, "Damn cursed children." In my brain, I was like, that's a great horror title. That's a great horror title, Josh. That'd be a fun thing to write. And he told me, you should write it. I'm like, no, I need to get up. I need to be able to get up to write. So that's not a good idea. You can write it first, and I'll we'll write it together whenever I get back on my feet. So that's what happened. For the genesis of where it started. As for the themes, motifs, and direction of writing it, that developed over years because we didn't have a set timeline to write it. We just wrote it when we had, I guess, time, but it was more like when we had the passion to write it. Like when you had an idea to add to it is when we wrote it. We didn't force anything into the story. Mm-hmm. So it became this distilled, even before each of us wrote it on a page. Our ideas got distilled in our heads before we did that. So anytime Josh would send me something or I send Josh something, it was always already been filtered in ourselves. It wasn't like, what do you think of this? It was more like, I thought about this over a couple of months, and this is what I got. Now, what do you think? So it's not like I farted out an idea and I'll throw it into into the internet and go, what do you think? So it was a really weird, wonderful way of writing. It takes a long time to do it. But for people who we sent the digital preview to, they always ask that question. It's like, how long did it take you to write this? Because it seems like it's perfect timing. And like, we wrote it when my kids were not teens. So that was a long time ago. So it's been a while. So for Josh, he can talk about his experience, I guess, writing it and how he got his ideas from.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I love the collaboration of comics. I love working with a group in anything you do. I'm not the kind of writer who wants to sit at home and have nobody bother them and just write alone for hours and hours. And so the modern collaboration of this as well is that, we're not in the same city. And then eventually when Howard tracked down an artist for us, that artist isn't even in the same country or continent. So that was a whole other thing. But yeah, for this comic, it's fun because if I get credit for coming up with the title, Howard gets credit for saying, oh, we can actually do this. And then I get credit for kind of getting the loose plot together and then Howard forming it into like more of a good, like 5-issue thing. We both kind of did the characters. And even though the first draft of it was written ages ago, like we wrote right up to the 11th hour. Like we were still changing word balloons and having very amicable debates back and forth of whether to use just like really finished out and right before thing went to print. So yeah, it was lots of back and forth, lots of rewrites. On the off chance that we ever get one of those like really pretty expensive hardcover absolute editions of this mini series, the script's unreadable because it just went through so many drafts and purple, blue, yellow, and then it started as a really nice format and then just went to hell. But we knew what was going on. But yeah, so it's tons of influence from everywhere. But I think the initial thing was the joke of damn cursed children about how kids always make you sick. And like a lot of horror, it might not be a super original concept from, the initial little pitch, because kids in horror are ancient, Village of the Damned and stuff like that. Yeah. Like there's always that creepy kid. But all you want to do is have some interesting characters, put a couple interesting little twists on it, and be that kind of horror story where you're actually cheering for your heroes to survive. You're not just like Friday the 13th waiting for the next kill. And we really did that. Like I love these characters. And because you're a comic book, like I've worked a bit in film, you can really do anything. And that's you hear artists talk about that over and over again, is that we have these giant action scenes and armies of monster children. And you could do that in a movie. It would cost millions and millions of dollars. And there's something about the page 2 where we can kind of get away with murder of doing nasty things to children that, Howard might speak of the trouble he had finding a publisher for us, because maybe rightfully so, they were like, oh, this might garner some poor attention from some censorship groups. So all that being said, that's why I'm so excited that this is finally coming out, because it really is one of these nerd dreams comes true. Like, we worked on it for so long, and it just really is, don't give up, keep soldiering along, and eventually it'll come out.